Welcome back, fantasy managers. This is Devo1099 with Fantasy Football Backers. Game Week 17 coming up. Bit of a calm before the storm with the holiday fixtures being tightly packed in, and we want to get through this fairly quickly. I'm going to switch up the format slightly and go position by position, try to focus on some of the decisions I'm looking at in advance of the week. This is getting out slightly earlier than normal. As you'll notice, I'm drinking coffee rather than beers. So it's a morning edition here at Fantasy Football Backers. So let's get right to it. We'll go to keeper. And the decision to keeper is going to be whether to trust the skill and talent of the likes of Courtois and De Gea in relatively easy matchups. Or to look at some of the flaws in defense that they've been showing over the past few weeks. I think for me, I'm siding with just the overall quality level of Chelsea and United being that much higher than Sunderland and Norwich. So Chelsea has Sunderland at Stamford Bridge. Even while Chelsea has really struggled, they've only allowed 3 goals in the past 4 game weeks. So some of the struggles have been in attack, which we're not going to be concerned with Courtois, and Sunderland is still Sunderland. They've been a little bit better, but this is a match that unless Mourinho's players have completely quit on him, they should certainly contend for a clean sheet. Any team can give up a goal, so you can't totally count on that. But in terms of this week, I think that Courtois is certainly in play. He's 9.2 million on Mondogoal, 4,400 on Draftkings. So he's not overly priced like Jack Butland is on Mondogoal, who's 11.5 million. I think he's in play considering the cheaper options that I'm going to get to are certainly considerably riskier, I believe, than Courtois. So De Gea against Norwich. Norwich doesn't really have any players that you could count on for goals either. They're certainly a slightly better side than Sunderland, I think, at this time, but it's pretty close. And De Gea, I think if you're splitting hairs, I think De Gea may be a better keeper than Courtois. And the problem there is that they're starting some under 21 type players with Borthwick Jackson and Varela getting starts last week. So some issues with every team that we're looking at this weekend for the Saturday slate. But I think that De Gea and Courtois would make up my cash team. And there's 2 other, so Butland I would not look at Mondogoal at 11.5 million. I think he's been outstanding. That's one thing I'm highlighting in my article is the difference in the way that the pricing models work between Mondogoal and Draftkings. Butland's up at 11.5 million because he's gotten a tremendous amount of saves and gotten clean sheets in the process. Last week I think he had 9 saves and a clean sheet, which is an outstanding game. On Draftkings, he is 3,500, so he's considerably behind Courtois and De Gea and even Elliott and Myhill. So Draftkings looks a little bit more at the bookie odds, I think, as they do their pricing. So you're not going to necessarily get a break because you've got a inferior team facing Sunderland, something like that. You're going to end up paying for that probability. Whereas on Mondogoal, recent form is going to dictate the pricing a lot more. So you can actually get a break on a team that maybe hasn't been playing well, but now faces a much easier matchup. So Butland's out of play on Mondogoal and probably one of the top plays on Draftkings, and that happens a little more often than you'd think. So something to keep an eye on. Just understand that that's just the evaluation that you're going to do. You end up playing different keepers on different sites, and that happens. Also, the keeper win is more important on Draftkings. So Butland's a little bit less likely to win, a lot less likely to win than Courtois or De Gea. So the other two guys I mentioned briefly there, we have Elliott with Newcastle. They've got Villa, and Villa is pretty bad. Newcastle is also pretty bad. So this is a match where I think Villa is probably pretty excited to face a defense that is almost as bad as theirs, and Newcastle is content to get a home match against the worst team currently in the Premier League. So this one could go either way, and I think that there is a certain amount of risk, but this will come down to how the final breakdown of your team goes, because Elliott's only 5.3 million on Mondogoal. So I think that discount from De Gea and Courtois is certainly interesting. It would depend on whether you would end up being overpaying for certain players, like if you would try to fit in Sadio Mane because you've got a hunch that he's going to come good. It's probably a slight overpay to use him, but if you're saving the money at keeper and you can get a clean sheet and then get a goal out of Mane, I think you've got a really nice differential there. So I would probably use Elliott over Myhill. Myhill has Bournemouth, who's been playing well enough to probably avoid here. But that's going to be even a bigger differential, because if you're looking at 4 viable keeper options on Mondogoal, Myhill is probably a pretty distant fourth. But West Brom could keep a clean sheet. It wouldn't be impossible there, and that's a type of differential that in a large contest could really come through for you. Let's move right over to defender. I see a fair amount of defender options this week. Only one stands out in terms of being a significant discount. The pricing on the rest I think are affordable. You may want to choose some, even just taking a 1 or 1.5 million break on some players is going to be worth it to get the higher price midfielders and strikers. But again, with Chelsea, I wouldn't want to stack my entire defense with Chelsea just in case this player mutiny is real. Mourinho threw them under the bus. They may not be, surely they're all professionals, but they may not be fully focused to win the match for him to help him keep his job. So I do think there's some risk in using Ivanovic, Spilicueta, and Zuma, and it's not like you're getting a tremendous discount in the first place, but you're getting Sunderland. So, if you wanted to use an entire back line with Courtois and those 3, I think that's perfectly reasonable and could really pay off. I don't necessarily see any of those as particularly good options for cash games. Otherwise, maybe Ivanovic, if you think that his attacking is potentially going to come through for you. Leighton Baines for Everton. Not the best matchup with Leicester City, but I just want to touch on him. He played 90 minutes last time out, and you would expect that a week later that he's going to get that opportunity to do the same. His attacking potential is always top of the line for defenders. In the Premier League, I don't think this is a great matchup in terms of getting a clean sheet. I would probably rather wait to see him get a little bit more involved in the attack and then be in contention for a clean sheet or a single goal. I think that Everton Leicester could get pretty high scoring. So probably would avoid Baines this week, but just one to keep on your radar because in a large contest he's got the ability to get a goal or an assist. I would imagine Lukaku remains on penalty duty, which does take a big chunk out of Baines' value because Lukaku's just been so good this year, and it's been a while since Baines has been back. I don't know if we'll get any confirmation of that in advance. Usually it takes a penalty popping up to be able to see who's going to take it. Then moving over to Manchester United. I'm not entirely sure about the fitness of their back line, but one player I wanted to touch on was Guillermo Varela. He's I think he's 21, young player. He started last week and looked pretty good. He also played in the Wolfsburg match in Champions League, where nobody looked particularly good. But I haven't actually seen him play. I'm looking more at his his statistics, but he provides a nice floor with defensive statistics. His tackles won and interceptions are really strong. As we mentioned, we like them as one of the top teams to get a clean sheet this week. He's only 5.2 million, so I think he's going to be pretty popular. If he played for a lesser side, I think that we would probably see him fly under the radar a little bit more. But when you're looking at Manchester United, people are going to be all over that. And if they're looking for a discount, then he's going to be easily the best player to help you save some of your budget. Last three guys I wanted to touch on. Craig Dawson for West Brom, he scored last week, which probably will artificially raise both his price and his ownership levels. That said, West Brom, is their best way to score is always going to be on set pieces anyhow, and Dawson can be a part of that. But $7.5 million for a team that plays pretty good defense, and if you just kind of flip through their game log, All right, so no sign for today. A little embarrassing there. Apologies. So Craig Dawson is, back to West Brom, their game log. They're pretty predictable in terms of how they perform against teams that you expect them to do well against. They tend to do well. If they expect to do poorly, they tend to do poorly. They kind of fit really nicely into their spot in the table. So I do like Dawson this week. Also, Daryl Janmaat. Getting a home match with Villa is as good as it gets, and Janmaat is still a really sound attacking player. I think he had an assist 2 matches ago. A home match against Villa literally is the best time to play Janmaat. So if you're not going to use him this week, I don't think you should use him the rest of the season. He's fit. Cisse should be back unless they decide to go with Mitrovic after his little poke goal last week. But I really like Janmaat this week, 7.9 million, and then Adam Smith for Bournemouth. If West Brom concedes possession, which they tend to do, and Bournemouth has been pretty good in possession, Adam Smith has been playing as a right fullback and has been really active. He's also a decent discount at 6.6 million. So if you have Varela and Adam Smith and Dawson, you can pretty much get whichever attacking players you want. So those are guys that I would definitely look at. I don't really love the higher priced players, though. I would certainly want a Chelsea defensive line for some large contest, just to take advantage of the fact that they should be able to keep a clean sheet against Sunderland, or maybe let in 1 goal. Moving to the midfield. I think that the midfield is a little less obvious than it's been because I don't necessarily trust the attacks of Chelsea and Manchester United. Those are still the 2 top teams in terms of projected goals. And then you've got Everton and Leicester looking like a potential shootout, though the bookies aren't seeing Leicester scoring much. I think that's kind of a poor decision on their part. I would definitely expect Leicester to be able to continue their form against Everton. I think their defensive side is a lot weaker than you'd anticipate. Willian for Chelsea, especially if Hazard can't go after his hamstring strain last week. I think Willian has to be in your core team for cash. He's just been too good not to. He's scoring goals. He's on all the set pieces, and he's just a really good player right now. He's the only thing good going for Chelsea at the moment. Mahrez is 12.5 million. Willian was 12.4. Mahrez, you can take Mahrez and Vardy and probably be pretty fine with your decision every game week this year. I don't see this one as being a particularly different one. It's not a tough test here. So I like Mahrez quite a bit. For Southampton, they've got Tottenham, which is a tough match. You've got the weekly decision between Mane and Tadic. We'll know who's starting in advance, which is of course important. Mane's 11.3 million. Tottenham is rumored to be going after him in the first place. I guess a number of teams are after him. Tadic is down at 6.9 million. He didn't play last week. He came off the bench, excuse me. I think that Southampton is probably, it looks, with those kind of substitution patterns, it looks like they may be, concerned with Tadic in terms of his play. But I think more likely they've got, advanced metrics and analysis based on injury risk, and they're good at rotating their players, and they're willing to take a player like Tadic, who's been one of their best players, and just sit him for a game. And you look at a team like Arsenal, who talks about doing that, but then doesn't sit Alexis Sanchez, and then he gets injured. So not that Southampton hasn't faced their share of injury issues, but they do seem to do some preventative substitution, which could help out. And for that reason, 6.9 million for Tadic, I think, is a really nice price. Eriksen in that same game, I think, is okay. 11 million. I like him a lot better in games that I think they're going to get the majority of possession. Shaqiri should be back for Stoke. He's got Palace and Cabaye for Palace, also an option. Albrighton's exceptionally cheap at 6.2 million, and he's always creating chances and in play for an assist. So I think that's a solid option. And the last two guys I wanted to discuss, Juan Mata for United. If you're going to try to get a piece of the United attack, I do like Mata out of the midfield. And Jorginho Wijnaldum, 10.6 million. I think you're still paying for his 4-goal effort a few weeks back. But he's also been, he's been a guy that just can get around the ball. He's always near the goal. He's kind of a good attacking player in spite of, not necessarily having the traditional statistics that you would expect for a player that's scoring as many goals as he is. They seem unpredictable, but when you do it on as far as a regular consistency can be for Newcastle, if you do it fairly regularly, maybe it's not as random and unpredictable as it seems. That said, am I paying 10.6 million for Wijnaldum when he's not really on the ball all that often? Probably a GBP, large field contest for me. But I do think he could be an option. It's in the late match. I suppose there's some risk of him not starting, but I can't really see that as being a concern. So let's move along to striker. This is where I think that it's always tough to spend on strikers, just because if they don't score, they typically don't come through at all. But first and foremost, you've got Lukaku and Vardy. Like I said, I think that match is going to be full of goals. They're in probably two of the best form players. I think they do lead the Premier League in goals along with Mahrez. So finding room for Lukaku and Vardy, the overlap is going to be fairly tremendous. I think they're very easily affordable this week, and I think that they're going to be highly owned. I do like them. I think for cash, I would probably use them because I think that I can make up the difference in the other spots on the team. And I just don't think there'll be a whole lot of fun to fade. Whoever starts for Chelsea could be Costa. Though Remy did score last week. I don't know how Mourinho's current relationship with Costa. It's always kind of shaky. Costa did apologize for throwing his bib at him and then started, but then Remy came on and got the goal to try to get back into the Leicester match, but that didn't really happen. Deulofeu along with Lukaku could be a play if you're gonna look into stacking Everton. I think Everton, definitely could win that match against Leicester, but it looks like a 3-2 type match to me. And then looking at United, you've got, Anthony Martial continues to be underpriced on Mondogoal, 5.7 million, and Memphis is 8.7 million. If they play together, this is it's certainly setting up to be a good matchup against Norwich. I would be willing to use both of those players. I think those are actually a really nice differential to see if they can link up. Some of the cheaper players and still players that I like. Bojan, maybe on penalty duty, 7.2 million. He's been playing as the lone striker. I don't think Diouf missed a couple goals last week that were pretty painful, but I think Bojan should play and get about 70 minutes. 7.2 million is pretty reasonable. I don't think you play him unless you're playing in a large field contest. He's not really a cash type player, but I think he does have that upside if he does, have penalty duty, and he's also, can get a few fouls drawn and is an active player. He's skilled enough to get an assist as well. Solomon Rondon for West Brom is only 5.3 million, which is exceptionally cheap. If you're stacking your midfield and you want to pay up in defense and keeper, Rondon becomes an option. I think in a match with Bournemouth, he should have a chance to score a few goals, and he's looked pretty good. It's tough for West Brom because they don't have a tremendous amount of attacking options to help give him service, but he's been pretty solid. And then it comes down to Cisse or Mitrovic. This is another issue where on Mondogoal you can't really play either. Cisse's been getting the starts. He hasn't done a whole lot with them. Then Mitrovic scored last week. On Draftkings, they're nearly the same price, and you've got late swap. So all you have to do is make sure that you leave enough money for Mitrovic, who's 4,600, and if Cisse starts, you put Cisse in at 4,500, and you've got the Newcastle striker. Not an option on Mondogoal. So unless you get a sense from the press conference what he expects to do, whether Cisse will stay in the starting lineup or not, you can't really use either striker. Not that they're really the best option in the first place, but having a striker against Villa would certainly be something you'd want to look forward to. So those of you that are more inclined to gamble a bit, I think that you could start Cisse unless you hear otherwise, and maybe have a pretty low-owned striker who's relatively inexpensive that could pay off if Newcastle can get a couple goals with Villa. So hope that was helpful. Slightly abbreviated as I mentioned, but Gameweek 17 should be a good one, and we've got a lot more footy coming up in the next week or so. So we'll be fast and furious here at Fantasy Football Backers. Thanks for joining us, and we'll talk to you again soon.